Hi there, everyone who's joining us. Welcome. This evening, we're excited to talk with you about some library research practices. We're going to wait just another minute here or so for a few more students to join us. Let everyone get in before we get started here. Great, people are jumping in. I hope all of you are finding this third week of class to be going well. And hopefully this is a timely resource for you as you are getting into some of the more research-based parts of your class and the work that you're doing there. So I think we're going to go ahead and get started. We'll have more people probably join us as we begin, but I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself, a little bit of the webinar, and then pass it over to our other panelists as I introduce her as well. So thank you so much for coming tonight. My name is Chelsea McHenry, and I am the Associate Director of Student Success here at LAPU. And I will be able to help navigate the ending part of our workshop here tonight. But in the meantime, while Professor Richards is speaking, I am actually going to be navigating the question and answer section and also the chat. So if you have questions for us as we're sharing with you this information, please feel free to let us know. We want to make sure to answer those, and we'll try to get those to you live during this session so that everyone's able to hear the great questions that you have as well. So all that being said, you should be able to find that in the toolbar of your Zoom account and be able to actually type in those questions there for us. So please feel free to do so, or raise your hand as well, and we'll be able to help you navigate asking a question. All right, with that, I would like to turn it over to Professor Dory Richards and have her lead us in this beginning part of our webinar here.
Okay. Well, as Chelsea shared with you, we are hoping this comes at a timely opportunity for you to really assist you in what you're doing in classes, as we're in the third week here. And we really want to give you the kind of information that will help you navigate not only the library, but just the idea of what's appropriate research sources and the do's and don'ts that simplifies the process. Because consistently over time, both us as former students and also within the field teaching, we find out there's a pretty consistent level of angst around the getting of the materials that you need and navigating the research into this. So we want to demystify this for you today. So we're going to start out going through what you'll be seeing on the screen right now. We're going to start out having a conversation about research sources and starting out right. We all know that starting out right gets you farther and is more timely and gets you what you need quicker and minimizes your frustration. So we're going to go to our next slide. We're going to talk a little bit about how do we start out right. And what I decided to include in this part is a piece of information about the most common mistakes that I see as a professor when people start looking for research. So one of those is, and you will probably know these intuitively, but when we bring them to the forefront like this, it gives us a better chance to really discuss why is that true? So the most common mistakes we see are assuming that websites are automatically legitimate sources and resources. The good news is we all know how to use Google. The bad news is that doesn't automatically get us to what we need, and especially in the world of websites. What we know to be true is a shiny website with some degree of professional sound to it is something that we gravitate to, and we can get there in a hurry. And we think it's legitimate because it looks and sounds legitimate, or because the person that's represented as giving out the information on that site is someone that their credentials give us a sense of legitimacy. Now, that's not to critique anyone that has a website or anyone that has appropriate credentials within a field. But what we know to be true is that does not make it an appropriate resource for what you all are doing in legitimate research. And one of the things to understand within this context about how do we start out right is understanding why there is a requirement in classes for research that is authentic, for materials that lend actual credibility to what you're writing. And the reason is, in all of your classes, you are doing work that is supposed to represent facts. And if it doesn't represent facts, it shifts over to being opinion. An opinion is great when you're asked for an opinion or in the discussion forum. Sometimes it's our opinions, but not when we're looking for legitimate facts that will back up what we're saying about this. So we want to not assume with websites. I don't care how good they look. I don't care how easily, I'm the psych field, so I'm going to say I don't care how easily they've slung in the word psychology into their title does not make them legitimate. And we're going to look at a couple examples of that look really good, but would not necessarily be appropriate resources. But before we do that, I want to talk a little bit about confusing magazines with journals. Now, buying of magazines is almost a lost art. So the likelihood of us having magazines in our home that we would be looking at for resources is slim and none, but we can pull up magazines on sites also. And what we need to understand is magazines are not journals. So oftentimes you'll see in the directions for a paper that it will say professional journals. So depending on what your major is or what the class topic is, that's an important thing to understand, that you are actually looking for a journal, not a magazine. Now, there is a magazine out there, and I'm going to emphasize the word magazine on that, Psychology Today, which actually comes in the profession. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. It comes with my membership in advertising my private practice online. And so that's a magazine I get monthly. It's a great general with a little bit of interesting material in it, but it is not a journal. And it will never be something that we're going to talk about in a couple of slides from now. It will never be a peer-reviewed journal. So Psychology Today fits under the category of pop psychology, even though it's got some legitimate material in this. Well, regardless of what class you have, there are magazines out there that sound topically appropriate, but they're not. And so what will happen is when we have this conversation about starting out right, you will bring them in to your work and you will get feedback from your professor that it's not a appropriate journal choice for you. So you want to look for the idea that you don't confuse magazines with journals. And when in doubt, ask your professor. Say, hey, I'm looking at such and such. Is this within the context? Now, when Chelsea takes you through the library workings, you're going to see a distinctive difference on what journals look like as far as the content that they have in them. But at this point in time, you just want to realize that a couple of mistakes that you want to avoid is assuming websites are automatic legitimate sources or resources and confusing magazines with journals. This one is the next that you will be seeing there is the glaring no of all times. Wikipedia is not a legitimate source. Now, if you're chuckling when I say that, I want to tell you there hasn't been a session that I haven't had at least one or two students use Wikipedia as a reference in their papers. If you know, we all use Wikipedia. I will look, if I want to know how old a celebrity is, I will look them up real quick on Wikipedia, but that doesn't make them a legitimate source for a research-based paper. So, you know, Wikipedia is only as good as the info put in, and you and I can put information into Wikipedia. So never use Wikipedia. We're going to look at a couple of websites, and in no way am I disparaging either one of these. These are just examples of what looks really good and are legitimate sources for life information or for content to understand something, but would not be for an actual paper that you're working on. So we're going to look at the first one there. And this one gets used a lot by psychology students. This is an amazing therapist, I'm quite confident, And she has an enormous amount of information. So if you look up at the top there, where it says, for example, mental health A to Z, and you click on that, you can see that you can get all sorts of information. I could put in there, I could type in bipolar disorder. And click on go, and I will get all sorts of information on here with links that look really good. And I am in no way saying that they aren't legitimate commentaries on, for example, this that we're looking at, bipolar disorder, but they would not be considered legitimate resources unless you track down through one of those. Like you looked at, can depression turn into bipolar disorder? And within that, it had a journal that would be recognized as a legitimate journal as its source. But look how many steps you put in your way to getting what you actually need for class. So great reference to learn more about something that interests you, perhaps could lead you to a legitimate resource. But what Chelsea's going to show you tonight is the shortest distance between 2 points, and that's using the library. Gives you a much better opportunity. The second one there, if you've ever had any experience showing up with some, I don't know, strange cough or something that's disturbing you about someone you know, WebMed is used all the time for that kind of information. And you look at their background, they look legitimate also, but the reality is same thing. What looks legitimate and what gives us content information for daily living is not the same thing as what you need for a class when you're writing a paper. So look at all that. Like we can go to ADHD, which is a common subject in papers in psych world for students. And what makes ADHD worse? There's an article right there. Well, that's great. And it might have some really information in it, but can we say it's research-based material? Not this easily. So when we're wanting to get our work done in an efficient manner, go to the source. Don't go to these lovely websites, which are legitimate, used all the time. I have been on both of those for information for myself. So the next line that we have there on our screen is using Google search in place of the university library. You are again creating multiple steps for yourself that are unnecessary. And you're going to have to affirm and confirm that the material you've gotten is legitimate. There is Google Scholar. They've got some great articles, but you pay for them. I have yet to look at one that I would use in research that didn't cost additional money, or they will lead you to a website that requires you to be a member of that research base. Oftentimes your credentials won't match because you're a student, but I can go in there, but I'm going to have to do membership in their organization to access the material. So as great as Google Scholar is, or Google in general, it again creates another step in a process that you can shorten dramatically by just getting comfortable with the library and its resources. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the dreaded term called peer-reviewed. You're going to see oftentimes in the instructions for papers, it's going to say things like you need to use peer-reviewed articles. You need to use scholarly journals. And in that context, there's a purpose for this. When we talk about these sources, they are the ultimate legitimate sources that have a lot of background related to them that are what you're going to need. So when you see those two terms, peer-reviewed, scholarly journal, understand that they leave our magazine context behind. We're going to have no doubt that these end up being appropriate sources. So we're going to talk a little bit about peer-reviewed. We're going to move on to our next slide. And understand how we gather information in general. Now that has dramatically changed as the evolution of the internet and its growth, but this is still sources that you access through the internet. So newspapers and magazines, what they contain are articles that are written by reporters who may or may not be experts in their field of the article. So they're writing the article, they're getting information from someone else, but what we cannot say for sure is that it is research, peer-reviewed, legitimate, correct information. I am in no way indicating they're trying to mislead us, but it's sources. Sources come from all different areas. And what we can't assume is the person that wrote the article is an expert in that field. Then there are journals that contain articles written by academics or professionals, which means someone like me. I could write an article. I could, from both either professional perspective as a licensed marriage and family therapist, or I could write an article from an academic teaching perspective. I have a lot of experience. I have a lot of knowledge in my head. That's great. It might be a super legitimate, interesting article, but articles that are written by experts in any particular expert may have some ideas that are really out there. So you may get an expert on the medication used for some kind of an issue, and what they give you is their far out opinion, not research based. Everything you're going to trail back to in these subjects that we're looking at is research based. That means it isn't just my hypothesis, it isn't just my opinion, it comes from actual research. So even journal articles that are written by academics or professionals don't fall under the scholarly resources or the peer review. Okay, so then we're going to talk a little bit about peer review. Here is, and even the heading on this is more bold to remind us of that. These are articles that are written by experts, and they're reviewed by several other experts in the field. So let's say one of my areas that I've done a lot of research in or a lot of work in is trauma. So let's say that I write an article on an approach to working with trauma as a therapist, and I send it into a journal for consideration to be published. What's going to happen to that article is it's going to be reviewed by several other experts, not experts that are just in psychology, but experts that are experts in trauma. That narrows the gap between my version of information and a fact-checking version. It is several other people working in the field with no particular agenda. It's not like they're trying to get me published or not published. But what they're doing is they're assuring by reviewing it that the material in it is legitimate and research-based. And that has to be done for the articles published in the journal. What that creates is a more likelihood that material is scientifically valid. Now, you notice it says a more likelihood because research has flaws in it, and others can see the same level of flaw as legitimate also. But if you have several people reviewing something, it's far more likely that they're going to check this. The reviewers don't know the author of the article, and what that does is limits bias. So if I set mine in, they're not going to see an article with the name Dory Richards on it because someone may like me or dislike me and review differently. They are simply seeing the material that I wrote on trauma. So the emphasis on peer-reviewed scholarly journals in college, in universities, is that you are bringing to the mix of your paper legitimate material that you're learning from and about. And that's the ultimate. I know that school is to get to a degree. Been there, done that, feel that way too. I also know that the more important piece is, especially if you're heading towards a career, is that you have legitimate material in your head from the research you did to write these papers that makes it the kind of material that will enhance you as a professional. So despite the fact that this can be an arduous experience doing this, especially when you're first starting out, the ultimate goal is that everything you learn, and if you read your classmates' papers also, everything you learn is based on peer-reviewed scholarly material from scholarly journals that has the best likelihood of being legitimate material. And I think the idea for us of demystifying for you and giving you the reason why there's such an emphasis on this will hopefully make it you a little less normal student resistance to, oh, why do I have to do this? Why can't I use that website? So moving on from that, I believe that the navigating of the library starts with Chelsea. So Chelsea, you're on.
Thank you so much. So I hope that that context is really helpful, and I'm going to kind of do exactly what Dory has shared of making that line of connection of what's the path of least resistance to maybe finding some of these materials, and how do you even do so by going into the library to access them. So we'll have some actual practice as well as some instruction here. So we're going to start with a few of the terms and tools that we're going to navigate in the library and learn how to access to make sure that they're helpful. One thing I would like to point out, even though it is a very, very important part of the concept of writing in academics, writing an academic paper, this webinar isn't going to cover APA citations exactly. It's going to have a section about APA. We'll talk about that towards the very end. And it also isn't going to address what do you do once you found the paper that you want to use for your paper? How do you use that to actually write the material that you're going to be submitting for a paper in class? Instead, this is literally about how do I navigate in the library? How do I find those peer-reviewed articles that Dory has just mentioned? And then how do I make sure that I have actual material to begin my actual research reading? Those two webinars are going to be happening in the following sessions, one in spring 2 and one in summer 1 as well. So there's more to come about that. And if you do have specific questions about those details, I really encourage you to reach out to your instructor, because in the meantime, while you're waiting for those webinars, they'll be able to help you navigate that kind of a conversation. So I just kind of want to set up the expectation of what we're going to do here in the coming minutes. But first, let's go through a few of the terms and tools. The first one is one that you may see when you access a library that you've never heard before, or maybe when it's said, it's one of those, it's a homonym, or it may sound like something else, and it's Boolean. And a Boolean is not the lovely, delightful seasonings that you put into a soup or a stock. Instead, a Boolean is actually a system of logical thought that is used to create true false statements. If you work with data in your profession, or you work with even in a technology field of some sort, often it's those and or statements that exist to be able to create the logic and reasoning for what it is that you're specifically looking for. And we'll go into more detail about that later, but that may be a term that you've seen and may not have known what it actually referred to. We're also going to talk about keyword searches. Many of us are familiar with these, even if we don't call them that, because we all know how to use Google. We do, and that is part of a keyword search and how we actually access the information. But we're going to talk about how do you use it specifically in the library, even specifically the library here at LAPU. We're going to learn how to find the full text finder. Many of you may have been frustrated in the past if you've ever encountered this issue. I know before I learned about this, I was frustrated where I would find something that had a great title that I thought would just be perfect for my material, only to learn that you have to purchase another website's material to be able to access that information, and all you can see is the abstract. Well, you're easily able in the library to eliminate those options and find only the options that allow you to read the entire article or material to be able to use it for your paper. So we'll go through that as well, along with how to identify what has been peer reviewed, because at times in the library, they will find things like possibly a magazine like Psychology Today may show up in some of your search results. So we'll show you how to actually eliminate those from the get-go as well, so you're only finding the most important information. We're going to talk about an abstract and defining what that is. The abstract can be really helpful as you are even determining which of the resources you find you're going to actually use for your paper. The next one, we're going to talk about dates. At times, especially as you get into more of your upper division units, or if you're in a graduate program, oftentimes it's important to look at recency. After a while, there's times that data has been it's outdated information at that point. We've learned new things since the article was written. And so at times you may want to pay attention to the time frame in which the article was published and be able to keep it sometimes to roughly 5 years so that you are able to have what you would know to be the most recent research around that area. That's just a general guideline. And then the last thing we're going to talk about tonight is going to be the citation tool, because one of the many, many blessings of going to school in 2022 and not in 1992 is that there is a citation tool built into the library that will help you navigate that initial part of APA formatting, which we all know can be quite cumbersome to try to learn off the bat as a student. And so this at least will be a starting place for you. So, oops, there was supposed to be one more article there. Okay. One of the things that we're going to do is we're going to actually go through the library together. You can follow along if you would like. I'm going to talk through a few things first, and then we're actually going to practice, and you can then actually join us on the website, and I'll have that posted for you later. This is what the landing page, we actually have a window into APU's library, and that's how we partner together with them as basically sister schools in our APU system. So we'll be using their library that is housed on the LAPU websites. When you actually click to log in, which I'll show you again soon, you're going to click in to access your LAPU email account. You won't want to click this top one. It won't work for your credentials, but this one will just let you continue right on in with your single sign-on that you've already used before. So we're going to highlight a few of the pieces that we've talked about already, and that is when you get to that landing page, it actually has a keyword search section where you can just type right into this box, almost like a Google field, to be able to access that. And I have a practice example that we're going to see some different variations of results that you may get depending on what you've typed into this keyword search. This is the most simple version where you can just type and hit search. You can see here there's already a few other pieces underneath, but there's also the advanced search button. If you click on the advanced search button, this is where it brings up for you the Boolean options, where you can create a yes, no kind of example to be able to really get nuanced in the type of research that you're looking for. So for an example, you can be searching by, in this section, each of those fields allows for you to narrow it down to search by a specific author or to search for a title versus just a keyword that may be available. You may be searching for a journal specifically, and there's many different options in here, so that drop down can help you narrow it. But additionally, you can use or, not, and in these searches to create a logic statement to find something specific. So in the example that we'll have later, I can talk about one of the examples for that type of a paper later on. As you continue, if you go back to the simple search, it actually will allow you to click on these other tabs across the top to be able to narrow your search. Maybe your paper for a specific reason is asking for a video. So maybe you would want to look under books and media to find an actual video that has been peer reviewed and has information that's been researched and is validated in that way. Additionally, maybe you're looking for a journal to be able to provide that as a starting place. The other thing that you can do right here from this simple page is actually to click things that are available here at the APU library, which is always great, especially because then you don't have to wait for anything to come to you. It's right there. You don't have to ask or request it to be shipped from another library to then see if you're able to borrow it from your home. I want to encourage you that in every single course here at LAPU, you should never need to request a physical book or article to be delivered to your home. Everything is available to you directly online, and you're able to access it through your computer so that you're able to do it on your time frame at the time that works for you in the week that you need it. Additionally, though, you can also select the peer-reviewed scholarly only. Per Professor Richards' feedback here about why we use peer-reviewed and really what does that even mean, by simply ticking this box here as you begin to search, It solves your problems of knowing that every single article in the results is going to show up, every book is going to show up as a peer-reviewed item. And that to me is so helpful in regards to validating the information that you're going to be putting in your articles. It just saves you so much time to not have to navigate that. And you're able to find things that exist in the catalog only. So all of those little details to be said, I would encourage you, if you're able to follow along with us, whether even if it's on your phone, maybe, but maybe it's on your laptop or device of some sort. I encourage you to join by going to my.lapu.edu. And at the bottom left-hand corner of that, there is actually a place to click to go to the library. So I would encourage you to follow along for a few minutes. We're actually going to use an example from a class that some of you may be taking right now. It's the English 105 class. This is called the argumentative essay. This argumentative essay is actually an assignment that requires specific number of sources. And you can see here in this number 2, it actually requires or asks you to find 4 sources of information, with 2 of those coming from academic peer-reviewed journals or texts. So you know that at least 2 of those you want to be from a peer-reviewed source. I highly recommend that you strive to have 100% of yours coming from a peer-reviewed source. In general, I think that that is your best practice, so that you don't ever get complacent with finding those when it is the time that you actually need to have 100%. And so additionally, this would be one of the first assignments the student in this class is going to have to use the library. We're actually going to do this assignment a little bit, not do it. We're going to talk through how do we navigate the library and find resources that may be helpful to us. If you have another assignment that you would rather look at specifically and follow along, please feel free to do so. And again, feel free to ask questions in the chat if you have them. But if you see here, this assignment instruction includes to choose a topic related to issues within the workplace that interests you. It has a couple of samples. We're actually going to work from this very first line that's right here. It says a federal movement to mandate family leave for new parents. So one common mistake that I believe many students make that makes it seem even more intimidating to access the library is they will copy this sentence right here, like it was Google, and they will drop it into the search box that is on the library. And they'll click the right boxes. Everything seems great. Seems like a good step. And if you were in Google, it would return probably a million results for you, and it'd be wonderful. If I actually did this for the library though, and I resulted in 0 peer-reviewed articles. Why would that be? Why is that happens? And what I have found is students do one of 2 things when they go to actually insert keywords in their search. They either niche it down so far that they have eliminated all possible articles that would cover that topic, or they've gotten so broad that they have an overwhelming number of results that they aren't able to navigate that. This is an example of where it was so specific that it wasn't able to find something. So I recommend a quick brainstorm for that. This was my personal brainstorm that I just did in preparation for this evening, where I took the overall topic, a federal movement to mandate family leave for new parents, and thought about what would be keywords that might result in different types of research for me to be able to evaluate and consider for using in my paper. Now, I will say you're going to need most of the time, well, that assignment at the very beginning here says that you need to have 4 sources. I highly recommend that you usually find more. Almost always when I have written papers, both through undergraduate and my graduate work at school, I have actually found almost double what I end up needing for my paper, because I need to understand and grasp the assignment fully, and even grasp what the different types of research are saying. There's going to be conflicting information at times, or new research that counters previous research, and it is great for you to have a better grasp of what that information can say. So I would, instead of searching for 4, might look for 8 for this one. And so in my possible keyword search, I narrowed it down to fewer words. I personally like striving for 3 words or less whenever possible. And these work great, even in just the simple search that is available on the landing page, not even in the advanced search. I was able to type in mandated family leave, new parents leave, returning to work following parental leave. So that one has a little bit longer, but it is not trying to merge multiple pieces. If you can tell in our overall topic, it is talking about federal, like a nationwide federal move, or even maybe government is implied in that, a mandate and family leave for new parents. So it's trying to merge lots of different types of aspects to it, where I want to narrow it down to maybe 2 of those, maybe 3 if possible, or even just 1 to find that. So you can see the next one is just parental leave. I just want to see what kind of peer-reviewed research is out there about parental leave. Maybe I talk about United States parental leave because it may be different, and then you could change to global parental leave. See, how is it different and unique compared to other places? You could look at federal family leave laws to see what research is out there about that, and many other options. It's really limitless in how you could change, and even just changing 1 or 2 words and doing multiple searches can really help you be able to find an article that speaks to the specific arguments that you're setting up in your paper, especially for an argumentative assignment like this. Research that you find, you are looking for claims that either prove or disprove a hypothesis or a thesis that you have laid out, and you want to address maybe both perspectives within your article and your paper to say why you've landed where you have in your decisions and in the research that you found. Additionally, this may also help you by doing several of these searches. It can help you identify authors that are researchers in that field. Maybe you see a certain name pop up multiple times, and maybe you can look then just for that author's work. You could also look for government documents. You could seek to find additional experts in the field. And one helpful thing is, as you look, is always looking into the citations, and that will be something that's part of the conversation, I think, for the next webinar about how to actually read for research, and being able to identify where those experts are. So, for example, I had taken one of my brainstorm topics, mandated family leave, and inserted it and hit that I wanted it peer reviewed and available at the APU library. You can see in my results, I hit 5 results, which, while that isn't a million that Google might give me, it does narrow it down for it to be helpful amount for me to actually look at and start with. The next thing that I do is I mentioned that I would help you find the full text finder. If you click this button that will show up right under your search result page that will open, it will actually say online full text, and it will then eliminate any additional ones that have not the full text assignment. What I would do then at that point is, if I find one of the results to be interesting to me, and I think that the title is even interesting, I would open the first page of the document, and we'll do that in a few minutes live in the actual webinar or in the actual library. But one of the first things that I would do before I even download the full text or access that, I would review the description or the abstract that is included. The description may or may not, if it's titled description, it may just be a like a publisher or an editor's version of what they see in the article to give some context for that. If it's an abstract, the abstract is usually written by the author who has published the document, so that you know the research that they are presenting and positing in their article that they have posted there. But I would evaluate that and see, is it even going to meet your needs? Does it mention any of the arguments that you're making in your paper? Does it have any of those keywords directly written in there? Is it something that's really broad and it's not going to be helpful? Like, for example, maybe you don't really need to read the entire 1993 Family and Medical Leave Act at all, but maybe it's something that's more helpful to look at something that is based on the term maternity leave, talking about, instead of just maternity leave, parental leave, which is a different term. Maybe that's more helpful for you. Or is it something that's too narrow and it has niched down, again, too far for you to be able to actually use it for your material? And that's something that you'll have to kind of determine for yourself as you navigate those conversations of what is really going to be helpful for you as you pick the citations for your papers. After you've determined that you would like to review that document, you can click, this is the top of the page that holds the abstract and the descriptions. You can click the download button. It's as simple as that. If you click on this access now, it will actually pop up with this type of version where it will tell you, do you want a PDF or do you want a CSV? So for those of you maybe who aren't as familiar with this, most of the time, and it even says it here, recommended for a desktop, a PDF is probably going to be the way that you want to go. Most of the time in your classes, you're going to be looking for data that is put into an article, a book, a paper of some sort. So it is a written form rather than numbers based. And so you can see CSV file, from many of us probably know, it's also what's equivalent to an Excel document of some sort, a spreadsheet of some type. So it's more, as it says, metadata only. So you'll want to click PDF and then go ahead and click to download that. Now, the thing that saved myself in grad school, I am blessed to have gone through grad school at least while citations were possible in the library, unlike undergraduate where you had to do it all by hand, you had to find it, you had to identify it in the back of the book, you had to match it up and write it. And so if you know and understand that APA citations are very specific. And here in every class that we have at LAPU, we use APA citations, and we use specifically right now, we're in the 7th edition is what we're looking for. So what this provides in the library is it actually provides an attempt, a first attempt at a citation for you. So if you were on the article itself, if you hovered over these icons at the top, which they can all do different things, to download, to share this, to save it in a folder, to favorite it, but it also has this quotation marks. And if you hover over it, it says cite. If you click on that, it will bring up this dialog box on your screen that will give you two options to either copy the citation or to export the citation. The first thing that you'll want to do though, before you actually do this exporting or cite copying, is you'll want to choose the correct style. So as I mentioned, we at LAPU are always going to be using the APA 7th edition that is listed here. So you'll want to click to that one, and then you'll actually either copy or export. If you export it, it will allow you to have it in a specific file, but the copy will allow you to paste it directly into your paper, and it will look like this. What I highly recommend though, as you do that, is that you copy with the formatting, even though you may need to change it to Times New Roman or something like that, because if you paste it without formatting, it will actually eliminate any of the italicized parts of the APA, which unfortunately for APA, if you're not careful with that, that is what will get you in regards to your APA citations not being 100% correct. Those little italicized parts actually really do matter and tell you certain things. When you're a researcher, it can inform you what edition and understanding when in the publication it actually happened to note when the citations have occurred or not. The other thing I would recommend is I really would recommend referring to your original source data for your APA citations. Again, we're not going to cover APA citing in this particular webinar. That's going to be in a future one, but this is a great starting place. However, it's not always going to be perfect. The citation tool is a computer and it may have errors, and only you as the person who is writing the paper can know if the error is there or not. So I recommend starting with something like this, but then double checking your work before finalizing it and submitting it as a final draft in your work for an assignment. And I believe that those are the pieces that we have in our presentation. I just want to take a couple of minutes to make sure to show you the actual library itself and navigate. And for the next few minutes, if you have questions, I really encourage you to go ahead and put them into the chat. We are doing this live, so we're able to navigate to any questions that you may have or something that you were curious about in the library that you don't know how to do. We would love to try to answer some of those questions right now for you. Or if you have questions more about peer reviewed or anything for Professor Richards as well, we would love to be able to answer these questions while I navigate. So feel free to chat those as I show you. So if you click onto the bookstore, oh, sorry, not the bookstore. That's not what I meant. The library. If you click into the library, it shows you this page here, just like I said, and allows you to navigate here to each of these articles or sections to be able to click into different sections. The other thing that I think can be really helpful to pay attention to, excuse me, I need some water, is some of the other resources that do exist here on the library page. If you are ever having trouble, I highly recommend that you pay attention to this section. You won't really need to book a study room, but you are able to contact the library directly and get some assistance. And so they can actually really help you. You can also email them or chat them directly. And often they'll be able to tell you if for some reason an article is showing is unavailable to you, or you're looking for something very specific, they may be able to help you find that. But most of the time, you'll be able to do everything right here through the library itself. So if we were going to search for some of these additional options, for example, maybe we wanted to look at what does paternity leave look like instead of maternal leave. Maybe we're going to do an advanced search. If we have this advanced search come up, maybe we want to type in paternity leave, and we want to say, if you click on these, it actually will change for you. We want to say not maternity. Maybe we don't want to know about, we're really looking at the father perspective of paternity leave and say, we're going to look at return to work. And so you can even see how it will populate for common searches for you and be able to then click search. So we just did a Boolean search and we're able to result in a few options here to be able to see. Now, some of these aren't necessarily peer reviewed because I didn't actually check that when we were back. So I would need to do that or validate that they are actually peer reviewed before I do that. So for example, here, this is an article that was written in The Independent, which is most likely a newspaper, not a published journal or a scholarly journal that we're looking for. Again, another article about Prince William coming to back to work. Also a world news site. So you can see how the difference of just even the article, the examples that I showed you before, where I was able to select the peer reviewed, it eliminated those, versus this is, filled with things that would not qualify as a peer reviewed article. So far, we haven't gotten any questions. Professor Richards, is there anything else that you think we should make sure to cover here in the actual library, or anything you would like to add?
Well, I think, what I would like to add is that hopefully what you're taking away from this is how approachable the library source really is. I think oftentimes it feels intimidating. Just the context of an idea of a university library, very user-friendly. You literally can sit at home in your jammies and do this and get the material you need. And also recognizing that the library is really ready, willing, and able to help you. Call in or email or go to their chat site. I've never had any experience with a library that was negative. And I'm not just talking about the one that we can access, I'm talking about all the time university libraries. And I'm also hoping that your understanding of kind of demystifying and explaining really why you're looking for what you're looking for and connecting those two together. The fact that you have this great resource of a library that really minimizes your work and the difficulty that you might experience doing this. And so that's our intent and what we're bringing to you. Happy, as Chelsea said, to answer any questions you might have.
And we did get one.
Okay.
So one question that came in says, is the American Heart Association or USDA good resources? Are they good sources?
They're good sources to get you to sources. So in other words, they are legitimized sources who can give you statistics, but for them to really give you specific articles around research, they absolutely will have those, but you are again adding an additional step. Now, if it does not say peer reviewed in the instructions for your paper, then that's something that you want to run by your professor, that type of source. And see, that's a really great question, because we know those are credible. We are given the CDC, for example, around the whole conversation around COVID. We know those are credible sources, but how they came to the conclusions on those websites is through research, and what you want is the research. So again, eliminate the middleman, or use the option of that middleman to find an article there and then go find the title of an article and then go find it in the library. Good question.
Yeah, it is a great question. And I do think that it's a good example. You mentioned statistics. At times you may need statistics or tables or things like that for an assignment. And places like the USDA may have some of those. But I do think, especially when it starts to look at the interpretation of data, you definitely want to stick to those original primary sources that are going to be listed in the actual library itself. So the next one actually says is a library question. Let me navigate into the library here again while I'm looking at it. And the question says, why don't the articles in the databases not a tab? Why does the articles and database tab not allow or show a search option? So let me take a look here. Aha, good question. So for example, let me share my screen again. Okay. So over here, it has, if we clicked on specifically this one, it creates a drop down option. And so this is going to allow you to search in a specific article database first. So for example, maybe you are looking at something that has to do with, let's pick a class, biblical studies. If you click on the biblical studies option and hit return first, it will actually take you into a database that is only about biblical studies. There are other examples. I mean, obviously, there are lots there, but there are also like almost affiliations of groups. So EBSCOhost was originally one of those. I saw one in here that is also about TESOL. So it has specifics, and so it will pull just areas about that. So maybe you have a question about COVID, but you don't want to really hear about the medical side of COVID. You want to hear about the impact regarding the psychology of COVID and how it's maybe impacting us as people in that way. So you may search one of those options first to be able to begin. And then in here, so for example, in the biblical studies section, it gives you different actual, the group or the coalition association of databases that have information that is based on that topic. So for example, you can pick one of these and narrow it down and actually search from specifically within there about that, rather than the big wide library section. I personally don't always prefer to do that. I find that it's more difficult to navigate. It makes my research process a little more cumbersome because it's requiring me to narrow my search more than I may be ready to. But as a last step, maybe I'm looking for one article that speaks about a very specific aspect of the paper that I'm writing. That may be the only time that I personally would utilize that section. So I hope that actually answered your question there. Any other questions that we have before we wrap up for this evening? Not just yet. How to do, okay, so somebody else had that same question. Great. Okay, so the question that I saw is, and maybe somebody can clarify, how do you APA recent polls, for example? Okay, so In regards to APA citation, what you'll want to look at is the APA 7th edition actually has a lot of resources in it that have, like, you can literally search for APA poll citation or APA statistics citation maybe, or table citation. And if you look to that, it will actually help you be able to know how to list out your actual citation directly from there. I hope that's helpful. But I will say personally, and maybe Professor Richards, you have a different perspective. I learned when I was in grad school, particularly, I memorized how to do a book citation, a website citation, and a journal citation. And those are the three that, for the most part, 90% of the time, that's what I probably used. And so
Yeah,
if it was some other exception, I did a deep dive just for that one item.
yeah, I totally agree. And that's a consistency over time as far, so you learn how to do that and then you stick with it and avoid, and again, we're going to have a great webinar coming out on APA, but avoid the game of telephone with APA. Don't listen to your friends who are in school or went to school on how to do those things. Learn how those salutations work, keep them consistent, and then, like Chelsea said, do a deep dive for anything that turns out to be unique in that.
Yeah. And I wouldn't use that through the library probably to find, I wouldn't be able to use the citation tool. The citation tool is going to be just specific to any article that you are actually looking at.
Right.
That would be more of a Google search or going to the reference book itself to actually find that answer. Yep. So one other question that we had here is, how would you know if the data, especially newer data, how do you know if it is peer reviewed? So they gave an example here that says the morning consult poll of 2,200 US adults conducted in early April, 16% of all adults said they were drinking more during the pandemic. So how would they validate that that specific maybe research or poll was actually a peer reviewed type of information?
Well, if it's a poll, odds are strong it's not peer reviewed. It's a poll. Polls, we know we'll get the latest poll on how we're voting or how we're spending our money or whatever it is, or in the example you gave. But the odds are very strong it's not peer reviewed because the poll has probably been taken in the last 6 months. It hasn't. If you can access the fact that it's included in a journal article, then great, you can go to peer review. But odds are strong that it is not peer reviewed because that's a process. When someone submits an article for that, reality check is the data oftentimes ends up being more obsolete and has to be referred to that because a greater time gap happens. That's a really good question. What you would want to do if you were including something like that is make sure that you've covered the amount of peer-reviewed articles you needed for the paper and add that as an addendum, add that as collaborative or corroborating information, but not give any inclination that that is a peer review because it won't be. Odds are very strong. Good question.
We do have one more. This one I think I can field is, how do we sign up for the more of these series? Is a great question. You will actually get a similar email to the one that you did. This will actually come in the next session. So it will be around the same time frame in the session where you receive the email, the initial email for this webinar. You'll get another one where you can sign up for that one. We also have a few that we have already done in this academic year that if you are interested in gaining access to those, I would recommend reaching out to your success coach and letting them know that you would like to have access to the study strategies webinars that have already occurred this year, and they should be able to provide those. And the two that have already happened in this academic year were the uh, actual study skills, how to study, and the other one was basically the fundamentals of writing for academics, like how do we actually break down a paper and write an initial part of the paper. So I recommend checking those out. We are really hopeful that these are providing informative information for you all. That was redundant, but you get what I mean. And then another question, will this recording be emailed? It should be. And so if you don't receive that for any reason, please reach out to your success coach, let them know that you didn't receive it and you really would like to be able to review the webinar live, the webinar that had happened again, but we should be sending that out. There was also a couple of questions that came in the Q&A. The first one is, does peer reviewed mean that all professionals in that given field agree, or can there be conflicting peer reviews?
There can be conflicting reviews. It may, if the team of reviewers does not come up with a consistent picture of it, the odds are very strong that article's not going to get published. But sure, there can, especially when you're looking at data, when you're looking at not the minute in value, but minute elements of it, or the way the research was designed in those kind of contexts, there certainly can be feedback, which means if it was too extreme, they wouldn't sign off on it. And if too many of them didn't agree that, you know, when I did that example of me doing trauma work, if too many of them went, no, that's way off base, it won't be published. Each journal has it, and I don't know the answer to that, something I can find out, but each journal has a specific amount of appropriately approved models for that.
Somehow I got muted there, sorry. Great. So kind of a last call on any questions, but again, we want to leave this open. So please feel free to reach out to us and be able to connect with us. Both Professor Richards and myself are available and would love to be able to talk. Additionally, any instructor that you have should be able to help you navigate these questions. We highly encourage you to speak with them, especially if it's pertaining to a specific topic that you're having difficulty finding information or peer-reviewed articles about. And if it's library specific to how to navigate something, you can also reach out to your success coach. They'll be able to, they're not really able to help you with the content portion of it, but they are able to help you with the technology side of making sure you know how to find the resources that you're looking for. Okay. We really appreciate all of you coming this evening and being able to attend, and we really hope that you have a really wonderful session. We hope that this sets you up for success as you write some of the material that you have to produce this session. So we wish you the best of luck and let us know. So thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.